Thank you, Louis. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who are expecting a Japanese face, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Well, I will look as close to Japanese as you can today amongst all of you. Most of Japanese people would end up bowing to you in the beginning. I decided not to with my receding hair. I thought you don't want to see my bald head. So I will divide my presentation into two parts, well, three parts. I just wanted to understand a little bit about the profile of people here first. This is okay? Yeah. You have the presentation. Can you open it? Yeah. And I will quickly take you through my presentation. I have some data there which is slightly old, but it's, to make the point, I think that should probably be enough. I will also take some questions in the end, right at the end of the presentation. I don't know what the interests are, so I will start with first telling you about what Japan is and what people there are like, and how it is to do business there, what the opportunities in this country are, and if you were to go and set up an operation there, what are the typical legal formalities or the typical concerns people will have as a typical startup. How many of us here are entrepreneurs, startups? And how many of you are looking at Japan at all? Okay, so there are some few people who are still looking at Japan. So most of the businesses are driven out of Tokyo in Japan. Japan is well, that's a small speck compared to Canada. There's some statistics out there. It's the third, well, it's still very recently it was the second largest economy, now it's the third largest economy. Now that China has displaced Japan, and I guess very soon we will find it going down further. They still have a large part of the automobile industry around the world and semiconductor businesses around the world being driven by Japanese companies. Most of the businesses are driven out of Tokyo. I would think around 95% of all the businesses are, the decisions are pretty much made in Tokyo, not in other parts of Japan. But having said that, we do have, these are probably the images of Japan that you have. So I thought, one of the things which I should do today is to also change your image of Japan. So typically you will see sumo wrestler, the cherry blossoms, the kimono, the people who are samurais and stuff like that in there as an image. And I guess I guess today, these days cherry blossom spots have become kind of more popular, especially this year being the 100th year of the cherry blossoms in Washington D.C., not very far off from here, I guess. And most of the people end up going and having a drink in the evening after the office hours. And I saw a very similar culture here today at Vertical. I don't know whether it's an everyday affair or not, but I happened to meet Suresh at Vertical, and I went there and I thought it was a private party going on, and I didn't realize it's just a normal bar, and it's 5 o'clock in the evening, and I didn't expect people to be there. Anyway, Japan, it's very common to have, everybody goes out for a drink in the evening, and there's a lot of communication that happens outside of the office with the office co-workers as well. And to the extent that we even go to hot springs together, sometimes even with the customers. They say that, we see each other naked, we don't have any secrets, and we can do business together. And that's what you see here at this hot springs. And I guess the new, Japan that most of you know, the robotics, the bullet trains, and the automobiles. And as I said a little while before, it's 120 million people, and about 10% of the population is in Tokyo. And actually, the greater Tokyo includes what they call the Kanto prefecture. That would be about 20 million people. And because I end up going to a lot of time when I see a lot of Indian food. I thought there would be people interested in knowing how many Indian restaurants. There are more than 1,000 Indian restaurants. Especially in the last 5 years, the number of Indian restaurants have exploded like crazy. I went to Japan in 1990, and there were like just 3, 4, 5. I can't find many there. Now there are like 1,000 of them. The next big city is Osaka. It's the second largest, and it's very close to Kyoto, which is the cultural capital. And for those who are interested in history, that was also the capital of Japan many years ago, which they shifted back to Tokyo later on. And I understand there's somebody speaking about China later on, and people who go to China and then also go to Japan kind of may get the feeling that these were part of the same country, so to speak, because if you look at Beijing and you look at Tokyo, it looks like this is like Western capital, Eastern capital kind of looks. I mean, if you look at the kanji characters. And I guess many of the Indians living here might even have some relatives in Japan living there. There are a lot of Indian settlers from early 1900s in Kobe. Actually, they all went to Yokohama first. It's a port city, and there was a big earthquake in 1923, and a lot of them moved to Kobe. And after that, actually in 1996, there was a big earthquake in Kobe in 95, and they decided not to come back to Yokohama, but those people who escaped from Yokohama to go to Kobe actually faced with some difficulties after the earthquake there. So what are the opportunities in Japan? And one is there is over 30% of the people now who are 60 years or over. So if you have any product or services for old people, Japan is the place, because more than 30% of the people are about 60 years old. Of course, that also means that the consumption is going to go down, the population is going to go down unless there's going to be changes in the immigration policy, which they are looking into right now. There's also, there was in the 60s, there was a baby boom, and in 2007 onwards to 3-4 years, a lot of people, about 5-6 million people are expected to retire who are hitting 60 years old. But having said that, this is more going by the age. They are turning 60. It's not necessarily that they will retire, not necessarily that they will retire, but there is this big shift that's happening. In fact, even people who are in their 20s and 30s, which is about 18 million people, or in the next 15 years it's going to run to around 12 million people. It's going to become 2/3. So there's going to be a huge number of, huge shortage in people who can really do the day-to-day activities in Japan. And the country which uses digital money the maximum around the world, around 33 million users of digital money. Everybody carries some form of digital money. I mean, I have one too, and some of it is actually built into your cell phone. And so, and then the number of shops that uses it. And for people who are working on embedded systems, or IT guys who are working on some settlement systems, there's going to be a lot of opportunities around that in digital money. Sorry, there's a bit of Japanese in it. And anybody who speaks Japanese in here? No? Oh, you do. So this is going to be very interesting for you. And I mean, robotics has been an area where they've done a lot of work, and about Ajimo and a few other robots which are now becoming slowly like household. Like they have had pets and stuff before, but now they have a concierge kind of robots as well. What this also leads to is actually opportunities in areas like computer vision. If anybody works here on computer vision, there's going to be a lot of opportunity around computer vision in robotics field, apart from the normal robotics area as well. The other thing that's happening is a large number of Japanese companies have been going global. And if you look at Toyota, actually 25% of the revenues are actually from Japan, and 75% is from outside of Japan. So there are slowly many Japanese companies who are really becoming like MNCs. That leads to a lot of opportunities for, let's say, IT services or BPO companies trying to do global support for these companies, because it's not, the language doesn't become so much of a barrier when you are dealing with some of these companies. After the World War, Japanese were not allowed to make aircrafts. That's the agreement that they had with the US. And this is no longer true now. And so they have gone back to making aircraft. So anybody working with aircraft engineering, any services that you can provide to engineering services or software or whatever, there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. I don't know how many of you know this history, that most of the automobile manufacturers are from Japan. Actually, they were all aircraft manufacturers in the early 1900s. And then they couldn't actually manufacture aircrafts anymore, and that's when they went to making more and more of automobiles. And so they have now gone back into making automobiles. But again, they were supplying a lot of parts to everybody, like Boeing to Airbus. I mean, there were many companies from Japan that have been supplying turbines to various other parts. The other areas are things like eco-friendly, technology, solar, wind, many other areas. There's a lot of work that Japan has been doing, and if there is any of you doing work in that space, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. In fact, if you look at it, apart from the Japanese, if you ignore the Japanese, if you see Japan's got a lot of companies working in that space, Kyocera, Mitsubishi, Sanyo, Sharp. Europe obviously is another area where there's a lot more happening, but Japan has also been doing a lot of work in the eco-friendly technologies. Sorry, this is a very old slide, but just to give you a quick reference to there's a huge amount of M&A activity going on right now. A lot of Japanese companies are going out and acquiring companies abroad. One, because of the strong yen, it's very easy to go out and buy companies. Also, the consumption locally is coming down, so they have to find ways to grow their companies, and they are going out and buying companies. This leads to a lot of opportunities for especially consulting firms, law firms, all these professional services guys. And they are struggling with this actually right now, and because Japanese don't. What's happened here in Japan is that in 60s, 70s, well, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, Japan grew at a very, very rapid pace, and a lot of people did not think that they have to think global at all. And so the younger generation really didn't focus on learning English or learning global ways of doing business. They thought just being local is good enough. And so if you look at people who are in their 35 to 55 kind of range, years old range, they don't have too many people with the global skills. And they are struggling with running global corporations and trying to deal with global matters. There's a lot of opportunities in this area. I thought there will be a lot of people interested in knowing about IT offshoring, so quickly touched upon that. It's about $2 billion of outsourcing from Japan. A large part of that is going to China, not so much to India at the moment. And there's because of the population decline and the need for more higher value services to be offered to the locals. And there's going to be a lot more opportunities in this space, especially with the companies going global, IT services, is going to attract a lot of attention. Setting up business in Japan, some of the things. Hi.
Sorry, before you go to the next slide, I have a question about the IT industry.
Yes.
I understand recently Prime Minister of Japan had a meeting with a leading cloud computing company, which I cannot say for competitive reasons in Japan. One of your companies in the introduction was a cloud company that you own, right?
Yes.
So is this kind of a revolution being adopted by Japan in a major way? Because 2 hours by Japanese Prime Minister to a CEO of a leading company says it at all. But on the other hand, when you're saying the consumer market and the consumption, the age group, I could be wrong, but I see a conflict here.
Sorry, I didn't.
So when you look at new up-and-coming revolution in the form of cloud computing,
Yes.
they're looking to cut the cost, social media is going worldwide, and enterprise solution are looking forward.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we see that you're saying there is less and less of domestic market.
Yes.
So I just see if there is enough opportunities for new revolutions to make path over there.
I think, see, one of the things, if you look at IT revolution, really, Japanese don't really do much, in terms of innovation in IT. So most of it comes from outside of Japan, really. So to that extent, there's always opportunities for those new technologies, new innovative stuff. There's going to be always opportunities in Japan. But if it is normal, traditional businesses that somebody is doing, and if you're trying to get into Japan where the market is shrinking, maybe perhaps not. Yeah. And cloud, just to make a point on the cloud side, the adoption of cloud is a bit slow there at the moment. Yeah, I mean, compared to any other parts of the world, it's still, I think, it's too early stages. I mean, there would be some companies going private cloud way, but not so many people are looking at public clouds yet.
Is it a security issue?
It's mostly the security issue that they are worried about, number one. Number two, there aren't many public clouds available locally. So Amazon is probably the best cloud that you can get in Japan, which they don't look at Amazon as a local company, even if they have local data centers. The data going out of the country is also looked at as a various, as a security issue.
Thank you.
So there are, some typical characteristics of the market. There are long sales cycles. Many of you have done business with Japan will know this, so I don't really have to go through this much in detail, I guess. And most meetings are long. Typical meetings would be with 3 people coming to meet you. One would be in their 40s, one guy will be in 30s, and the other will be in the 20s. The person in the 40s would most of the time be kind of sleeping during the meeting. The guy and puffing waves, smoking cigarette. 30s guys are basically conducting the meeting, and 20s guys is wanting to be the 30s guy, taking notes, vigorously. That's the typical Japanese meeting you see, and it's pretty common. And my meetings could be very long. There will be a lot of drinking sessions, knowing each other, and those sort of things before they start doing business. And I guess there are different ways of doing business. This also is, I guess, effective because once the relationship is built, you take off and they want everything done yesterday kind of thing. So there is short delivery time, long planning sessions and very short delivery times. And there is strong focus on quality, and that's always going to become an issue there. And the orientation, what you say is customer orientation here will be completely different. I mean, just to give an example, if I'm in, just to give I'm giving a US example. This is my first visit to Canada, so I don't know much about Canada. Let me say this. So if I go to a department store or something, and if I'm lining up, and what I've seen in the US is the agent will actually talk to each one of their customers, and they don't really care how big the line is. They actually give individual attention. While in Japan, it will be exactly the opposite. Now, big line, they immediately try to get some few other agents there and try to get these guys out as quickly as possible. And so the approach is very different. And the other example I would say is that if I go to a shop and ask for something, you know, it's normally they will say, oh, whatever is there in the shelf is what you have. While they will never tell you that the next shop will have this product, or while somewhere around here, if I ask some people, they will say, oh, we don't have it, but you may want to check out in the next shop. They will never tell you that. So there are various different, I guess each kind of people deal with these kind of situations differently. Japanese language is a huge issue, with them. Even if they speak English, they may say this is a language. Language is an important factor. And for people who are doing IT-related work, double byte character set becomes a important factor. So if you haven't designed your software to be dealing with double byte, then you need to be doing that before going there. Otherwise, that becomes a big issue. So for people who are looking at more setting up an entity, this is typical standard choices you will find everywhere in the world. Representative office, branch office, subsidiary, or looking at a sales and marketing partner. If you're not sure, just start with a partner. Setting up an office in Japan is a bit expensive. You'll also have to look at your legal and tax related aspects, which I don't want to get into too much details here. And other areas would be liability, reputation, and those areas, because if you start the operation there and then you pull out, and that will become a major reputation issue that you will have. How are we doing on time? All right. So, office is expensive. Office space is expensive. Typically you may end up paying 6 to 12 months of rent as deposit, and you may want to look at a business center initially rather than getting into an office. There are plenty of business centers available. Most of the international brand names, they also all have their business centers, so it should be pretty easy for you to deal with that. Hiring people with bilingual skills, English and Japanese, will become expensive. You'll have to pay a 30-40% premium at least, sometimes even double the salaries of the normal people that you get there. So people tend to make the mistake of hiring people who speak English very well but not knowing their business very well. So that's one thing which you may have to be careful about. Typically your cost to company would be 30-40% more than what you're paying. So because there's health insurance and pension and various other things that you have to look at. Oops. Taxation, again, I'm not a tax expert, but just wanted to quickly give you the fact that corporate taxes are 40% plus, so that's something which you need to live with. And there's also going to be withholding tax issues with most countries, whether it's your royalty revenue or whether it's a services revenue. Based on that, the approach will be different. So there will be a withholding tax issue that you will have in most places. There is a consumption tax of 5%, which is like your value-added tax. That there is a move to increase this to about 10%, which may happen in the next 2 to 3 years. Income tax, again, there is something called a citizen tax, which comes up a year later, so you've got to be careful about that. It's not just the percentages that you normally find. There's the second year, there's a percentage of tax that you pay based on the previous year's income. Living in Japan, housing becomes an important factor for anybody who's going to go here from here and then set up the operation. They term everything in some 3 LDK, or living, dining, kitchen is the LDK. So 3 bedrooms and living, dining, kitchen is called 3 LDK kind of thing. If you look for an expat house, it's going to become expensive. But if you are not looking for an expat house, then it's not that expensive. But expat houses are pretty big houses and in a kind of similar style as here. Schooling is an expensive piece as well. If you have kids going to school on English medium or international school, there will be around about 30K a year. So if you want to factor in those costs. People, eye for detail, very meticulous, highly disciplined. These are, I guess, most of you might know, but again, please don't say that this is the only type of people. You will always, the people are people anywhere in the world, so you will find issues that you have here, same kind of issues you will find. There are people who will probably not work properly on that. So, don't assume that all Japanese will work hard and be like this, but typically you will find people who are in this kind of in the interest of time, I will stop there. If you have any questions.
One question, because in the last couple of decades, and we saw the last tsunami, what happened, what has been the impact on the insurance of insuring a business? Because we saw what happened, and especially for all the large, for example, take a case of auto manufacturers, Honda, Toyota, they had issues with supplies.
That's right. Yeah.
Going to the respective countries, even to the exported markets. So what has been the impact on the insurance? And how does the business factor into that particular aspect? Because earthquakes and tsunamis, while very unfortunate, seem to be something which is outside everybody's control.
Yeah.
So why would a business be? How does a business take care of that factor?
Interestingly enough, I think most businesses around Tokyo were covered, while people outside of Tokyo were not really covered for any of these insurance. They didn't even many of them didn't even have any insurance coverage. The smaller size businesses. The coverage that they got, again, I don't know what was the level of impact that they had. I think some of the reinsurers had some issues, while the businesses typically did not have much of an impact, is what I understand. I'm not completely sure about what exactly was the nature of the impact, though.
Any more questions? So everybody knows everything about Japan. Okay.
Thank you very much.